We're joined by Representative French Hill, who represents Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District and also running for re-election against Democrat and retired Army Colonel Marcus Jones. Congressman, first of all, thank you for being with us.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Let's start with your race. You're running for your 6th term in Congress and out and about talking to Arkansans while you're on recess. What are you hearing from constituents?
Well, I think first and foremost, just like the national polls, you see inflation and the economy as number one. And I think it's tough in Arkansas from the standpoint of the cost. We have a very moderate income state, and you're talking about people spending $7,000 more a year on basic necessities than they were back in 2019. And our median household income is $50,000. So a lot of money. We're back to school. People are spending a lot of money to get their kids ready to get back to school. So inflation's number one. I mean, it dominates it. Still, though, we have a relatively healthy economy here, so we hear a lot about the need for trained, skilled workers here, too, when you're out and about.
All right. Well, let's shift gears. There has been a monumental shift in the presidential election with Joe Biden now out, Kamala Harris in. What has been your reaction to the resurgence of interest by the Democratic Party and the Democrats who are now in Chicago for the convention with a new candidate?
Well, I think for Democrats nationally, there's huge relief. President Biden was not up to the job when he was elected back in 2020, in my view. I've been with him many times over the course of the last 3 3/4 years. So I think for them, for a campaign, it's relief. But unfortunately, they didn't give their whole party a chance to pick their nominee. So they've just accepted Vice President Harris. So there's relief that it's Vice President Harris and not Joe Biden, which I think would have lost quite straightforwardly.
Could it not have been contested, though?
Well, it should have been. In the Republican Party, we had a vigorous open primary to see who would be nominated. And Ambassador Haley did a magnificent job. Governor DeSantis in Florida, others competed, and President Trump won the GOP nomination and was nominated formally at our convention last month. Nothing like that happened in the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. It was Joe Biden or the highway. I had a good friend, Dean Phillips from Minnesota, a member of Congress, who ran for president in the Democratic nomination that was just panned and crushed by the Democratic Party. So,
well, and now we have a Minnesotan as the vice presidential Democratic nominee.
Right. No lost in irony there. Also a former member of Congress.
Yes,
this is the most progressive left of center candidacy for president, I think, since the Depression, since sometime during FDR's reign.
That's quite a statement.
It is a statement. Kamala Harris is for national socialized medicine. She wants Medicare for all. She's against fracking in Pennsylvania, which is a source of tremendous jobs and energy independence for the whole United States and employment for people in Pennsylvania. She has said that ICE should be completely relooked at. That's the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Yeah. She was the border czar, and we see no results from that. So I think she's not qualified to be president. And I think Waltz is, who I serve with in Congress, very affable guy, very friendly guy, but he has a lot of far left positions.
Well, your assessment of Kamala Harris's economic policy, if I have it right, was outrageous, a dud, more catastrophic, Biden leftovers. Tell us what you mean by this.
Yeah. So Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee, just outlined her economic priorities this week before they go into their convention. And at the centerpiece was rent control, price controls. Price controls have been discredited in American economic history by both Democratic and Republican economists. They were last tried in a big way, really, by Richard Nixon back in the early 70s and Gerald Ford. We had campaigns to freeze all prices in the United States. It's just completely impractical. What it does is it creates shortages. So in her case, she says rent control helps people afford apartments. Well, here's the result. People will not build apartments because now they can't get a market return on the construction of new apartments. Landlords have no incentive to keep up their units, so you see a decline in quality in the units when you have rent control. That means that you'll end up with fewer units, and the units you have will cost more. So the opposite of her policy position, and that's why I deem it illiterate.
Understand. Mortgage rates, let's talk about those. They're still high. Do you think that the Fed will, as rumored, cut rates in September? And if so, is that the right move to make? And how many base points are enough?
Right. So the Fed raised rates to the highest level at the steepest rate, meaning the fastest rate, since 1980, because we faced the worst inflation that we've had since 1980. And that's why it's hard to buy a house, because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's inflation. It's that inflation that caused these interest rates to go up to push it back. So we've made progress. Inflation is falling, but it's still not down to the target of the Fed. I think the Fed's going to be cautious about this because while unemployment has ticked up a little bit and the economy appears softer, I think credit conditions in a lot of the country are still flexible, accommodative, if you want to use the technical word. But I think they could cut this fall if they believe the statistics will demonstrate that. That would take place in the September meeting. And look, my view is the Fed needs to take the action they think is appropriate based on the data. I don't think they handled it right in the pandemic. So I have no confidence that they're doing it right when they do it by just a group of people in a room deciding. That's called the PhD measurement. I think we ought to have an analytical approach. In the old days, we measured the price level against gold, but we have other ways to do it. We ought to have a Taylor-based rule or some other kind of rule that sets when rates should move instead of just leaving it up to people's political guesses.
Well, the PhD group, I understand what you're saying, and you do have a heavy background in banking as well. Is it true that you would like to be the chair of the Financial Services Committee? And if so, what would be some changes you'd make?
Right. Well, the House and Senate, the House and in the House, you have Democratic and Republican conferences. They elect
Correct.
their committee chairs. So it's not a vote of the whole House.
Right,
It's
right.
the individual parties. So I am running to be the Republicans' senior leader on the House Financial Services Committee, working hard on that. My policies would be, first, price stability should be the single focus of the Fed. We shouldn't allow these sorts of inflation issues to get out of control. So they should focus on price stability. How would they do that? Have a rules-based monetary policy that is not a Kentucky windage PhD assessment, but is really based on where the economy is and the math associated with that, and then call out bad fiscal policies. Previous Fed chairmen have done that. I believe Jay Powell should have taken the foot off the gas and begun raising rates at the end of 2020, not allowed it to go into 2021, and he should have said that the fiscal policy of the U.S. was out of control at the beginning of the Biden administration, and he didn't do it. I want to put emphasis on that. I want to put emphasis on housing and housing affordability. I want to put emphasis on making sure that our community banks, like the banks we have here in Arkansas, can compete on a national scale.
When will you know whether you are, in fact, chosen as the committee finance chair?
That'll be decided sometime after the election and before the end of January, sometime in that time frame.
All right. Well, best of luck on
Thank
that.
you, Chair.
Let's talk about your experience globally. You have a special interest in the Middle East and in friends personally in Turkey and in the surrounding areas. What is happening now with Israel and Hamas and the terrible destruction and the deaths, Palestinian or Israeli? Now we recently have Iran getting involved against Israel. Do you think we are heading into a more broad conflict that could become, some pundits say, the U.S. and Iran at war? That's frightening.
Right. Well, I don't believe Iran wants to confront the United States directly in war. They know that's a losing proposition on their case. But we're at the edge of a wider war, and that has at its heart Iran. Iran spends hundreds of millions of dollars per year funding Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Syria and in Lebanon. And those groups have one goal: the elimination of Israel. Not fighting with Israel, the elimination of Israel as a state. You've got to let that sink in for a minute. And now Iran is backed by China and by Russia. And they are connected in an axis of an authoritarian movement, with China buying all of Iran's oil, So you get Chinese money into Iran, then China builds missile technology and drone technology that are used by Russians to kill Ukrainians and used by those terror groups to kill Israelis and Saudi Arabians and U.S. Western countries.
So historically, the U.S. has been on friendly terms with Israel, and all of these attacks are lodged against Israel by Iran, and then therefore the link to China. It does speak to a bit of a fear that it could come down to the U.S. needing to get involved because Israel cannot do it alone.
Well, the U.S. is certainly standing by its allies in the region, including Israel, with arms and support and air support from these attacks, direct attacks from Iran. This is the first time in, I think maybe the first time in history that Iran has directly attacked Israel. Right. And there could be more of that. I think we should guard against that. In the meantime, Secretary Blinken, Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, is working night and day to have a ceasefire in Gaza. We should be very proud as Arkansans that when I was in Kuwait a few weeks ago, it's our Air Force members here at Little Rock Air Force Base at our C-130 Air Mobility Unit, the 19th Air Wing, that were delivering that aid into Gaza. They delivered almost, when I was there, 35% of all the airdrops into Gaza were delivered by our great airmen and women from Little Rock Air Force Base. We want that ceasefire to hold. We want the Hamas terrorists to give up their arms, and we want these hostages freed that include Americans are still held, that we believe some may well be still alive. And this is Blinken's top goal. And we've been close. We've had some breakthroughs, but we're not there yet. And I hope as we record this that we're getting closer to ending that.
He's on his 9th visit, I think, to Tehran. And he's there now, trying again.
Right.
So,
but here's something you've got to keep in mind. And when I was in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, in the region recently, we need a plan for immediately after that ceasefire. Who is going to govern Gaza? Who's going to provide security in Gaza?
Who's going to rebuild the destruction?
Right, and many countries have contributed to that year after year, and the Hamas terrorists cause terror attacks on Israel, which causes bombing, which causes rebuilding. It's a vicious cycle. How do we break it once and for all?
Right.
And the King of Jordan and the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, the Egyptians, the Americans, the Turks, the Israelis, all have to have some sort of a consensus around this. And what I think the Palestinian government in the West Bank wants is no more Hamas. Hamas cannot be in governance. Hamas terror group cannot be active so that is a shared Israeli-Palestinian goal. The question is, how do you make that happen? How do you implement it? And how do you enforce it? And I think these are challenging questions, but we have to know the answers to those questions to have a successful ceasefire, in my view, and that's what I voice when I've been in the region. That's
such a big ask. I can't even conceptualize who you could get behind or what committee you could get behind.
In 2006, the Israelis, the Americans, and Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian authorities, then as now, said, we're not going to be involved in Gaza anymore. And Hamas won a political election in Gaza for the civilian leadership, beating Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party in the West Bank. So they said, Israel's pulling out. The West Bank will no longer provide governance to Gaza. You're on your own. Those people in Gaza have not been better off since 2006. They don't have more jobs. They don't have better health care. They don't have better schools. UNRWA, which is the UN agency, has not delivered anything substantially better there. And now we're back in a moment of catastrophe.
Yes.
Palestinians being killed, food insecurity, a humanitarian disaster.
People are eating, leaves, according to Kamala Harris.
It's sick. It's sick. And I want to say the U.S. is standing by Israel. That terror attack on Israel by Hamas, backed by Iran, surprise attack on October 7th, was the equivalent for us on 9/11 losing 30,000 Americans. You've got to put it in perspective from the Israeli point of view, and they have a right to defend their sovereign territory from attacks. Those attacks continue today, modestly. So Blinken's on a mission from God, as far as I'm concerned, to try to bring peace in Gaza, stability in Gaza, food security, release the hostages, but as I say, we must have a governance process that the Palestinians, Israel, and the neighboring countries can support.
And no one would argue that this is a terrible, sad situation,
Horrible situation.
All around. Let's talk about lighter things. Let's get to the campaign. We have President Trump. We have Kamala Harris now. President Trump even says, I can launch attacks. I can call people names. Civility in a presidential race. Is the internet the end of that? Are we going to be calling names like third graders on a playground, or how do Arkansans who want to be good Republicans and support the policies of the Republican Party, but have a personal difference with the face of the party, how would you help them reconcile how to vote and what to do?
Well, look, it's a binary choice. I think President Trump's policies when he was in office for those 4 years were generally policies that I supported, many of those policies. Regulatory reform to reduce costs for small businesses, tax reform to increase investment in our country, jobs in our country, bring money back home, secure the border, eliminate the chaos on the border, create trade opportunities for American businesses through the USMCA, the replacement of NAFTA in Canada and Mexico and the United States. So those were good policies. They're better for the economy, better for public security, public safety, the border. And that's true. And I think he would have that as a core function if he were reelected this fall. Kamala Harris has got a bad track record, and Joe Biden have a bad track record on those policies. And she has a much more liberal social policy than I think a lot of Arkansans agree with. So, on the face of it, I think Arkansans would see that they'd be better off in the economy, community policing, safety, if they were to support President Trump. And I plan on supporting President Trump.
Okay, so overlook
But I'm not overlooking the fact that the behavior on the campaign trail has been a tiresome thing literally since the social media came into play a decade ago. And it's just caused a complete drop in the dignity of public office and the behavior of people. So I think President Trump should be focused on the policy difference between someone who is truly a national European socialist person, Kamala Harris, with her running mate who's equal to that, and his policies of a strong border, a better economy, beat inflation, leadership in the world. These are important points that they should make, but stop calling people's names. I don't support that. I've always grown up, I guess, remembering President Kennedy's inaugural address where he said, civility is not a sign of weakness. He was speaking about that context more in an international negotiating context between Khrushchev or the United States, but it's still a point. We should be winning our arguments based on the facts and the strengths of the arguments and not result in this back and forth of name calling.
Thank you for that. And I'll close with asking you if there's anything I missed that you would like to say to your constituents or in general.
Well, I just get up every day, 7 days a week, energized about the 2nd District, the growth of our economy here, the opportunities that we have here, and I work my tail off every week to benefit the citizens here through helping them with the IRS or helping them with veterans issues at the VA or any other things that they can approach our office to be of assistance with. But then I love working with our governor, our state legislature, our county officials, and our mayors to drive the economy and opportunities for Arkansans forward.
And I took a look at your House bills. You've got some in action and some that are maybe going to succeed, some that may not, but at least you're introducing bills.
Oh gosh, I've had several of my bills signed into law this year. We got for Americans held abroad. I've done a lot of work. I was just in Nigeria a month ago trying to get Tigran Gambaryan out of prison in Nigeria, and he's an American citizen. He was on a business trip to Abuja, Nigeria, was captured by the Nigerians and wrongfully detained in prison. And so we passed a bill this year that eliminated increased the ability for families of Americans held wrongfully aboard to travel to Washington to get support from the State Department. That was signed into law. Speaker Mike Johnson added 3 of my priorities in the national security bill that passed. Taking Russian assets to pay for Ukraine.
Yes.
That was a bill I wrote and authored, and it passed, signed into law. Putting more penalties on Assad for trafficking drugs in the Middle East. This was Bashar al-Assad is the leader of Syria. He's also aligned with Iran, trying to destroy Israel. He is a drug dealer now on top of everything else, and that's how he's funding his terrorists, through drug sales. That bill was signed into law. And then finally, I wanted to expose how rich the Ayatollahs have become since 1979. And President Biden signed into law my bill that exposes all the assets of the leadership of the Iranian government. You have a Ayatollah who's a religious cleric who's leading the nation as a religious theocracy, and he came into power in 1989. This is the successor to the founding Ayatollah.
Yes, I
His net
remember.
worth, according to Reuters, is $1 billion. And yet people live in poverty in Iran. So this is the kind of thing that I work on things to help our state, help our economy, and make America a leader in international affairs.
And transparency in finance is a good one.
You bet.
Yeah. Thank you for your
You bet,
time,
Karen. Good to see you.
Congressman. It's always a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.